Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Cryptid Chronicles. This is your host, Ryan Edwards, and I'd like to welcome you all tonight. Anyone that's watching live and anyone that's watching later, I want to say thank you so much for being here. But real quick, I want to welcome on my co-host, Kobu. He's a good friend of mine. I know he's been on the show a couple times before, but he's been free tonight to come on and help me out with this. So, Kobu, a couple words.
What's up, everybody? We're gonna see this later on here with Ryan. Let's see what we got.
Yes. And if you guys have read the description, you can see the episode tonight is going to be on Sasquatch, but not just sightings and history of it, but really the biology behind it, the prehistory of this creature. And what we're talking about tonight is pretty much the origins of it. Plenty of people talk about sightings and anecdotes and passing Gimlin films, the Bigfoot prints, all that. But with me, I talk about well the biology of this creature, the origins of these cryptids. And Bigfoot's one of the ones that has a really strong origin story because we have just so much evidence for it. So with Kobu, like what type of information on Sasquatch do you know about?
What I know about, I know like it's been seen like in the past, like with Native Americans and everything. Like even they have stories about it. It's not like it's hidden, but it's not like something super hidden. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's well
it's
known to the point where like everybody's heard about it. You know?
yes, like every Native American tribe has a story of some type of large hairy humanoid that lives out in the woods. Whether it's the Kushnaka of Alaska, the Sasquatch of the Pacific Northwest, or even the booger of the South, and the, like Chippewa tribes and Cherokee tribes. A lot of these tribes have stories of like some type of creature, and a lot of them say, "Well, this creature was here before us. It didn't come along with us. It was here before. It's always been here." So with that, I kind of look at the Sasquatch as a like a prehistoric species, and with that, we can just all we have to look at is its anatomy alone, because with it,
Yeah, because it's like people have said it's like a giant man, right?
yes,
So it's somewhat similar to us, but it obviously has its differences.
yes, and that kind of brings in well the two main discussions with Sasquatch. Well, from people that believe it's a biological species, is this a large ape species or is this some type of humanoid species? You have hominin and then the hominids. Hominids are like chimpanzees, gorilla,
Mhm.
the pongonoids, Gigantopithecus. Then you have hominids. These are our earliest ancestors, the Australopithecines, the Prankbeans, Neanderthals, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo erectus. Because of the creature's description, a lot of people believe it might be human. But also, if we look at its behavior sets, it also has very primate-like behavior, non-human primate behavior. So let's just kind of see what its anatomy and its physiology and its behavior sets. Where does it really lie in all possible family tree, or the family tree of other primates? And with that, we can go into like its anatomy first, and its ecology
What do
as
you
well. Huh?
w- uh, what do you think it would in your opinion, what would it lead more into? Something being similar to us or completely different?
With me personally, I believe the Sasquatch bonding Sasquatch is actually some type of an ape species, most likely derived from some type of Miocene ape species, more closely related to Triapiphecine or the Nubius species. And as we go on through tonight, you can see why I kind of have this hypothesis, because I do agree with some of the more, it could be a human-like species, but one big discussion point is Gigantopithecus. I am not a big Gigantopithecus supporter. Like a lot of people believe this is a giant ape that was once indigenous to Asia during the Pleistocene epoch. And let's see, actually, with Gigantopithecus, I know a lot of people love visual aids, so let me grab one real quick.
Oh, he's gonna come out with the skull. Okay.
This is the skull of Gigantopithecus. As you can see, this was a very large ape. Of course, Gigantopithecus means giant ape. And a lot of people believe this is a reference for Sasquatch itself. Because if we just look at the size itself, it's very similar to what we would think Sasquatches would be like. But there are some reasonings, for at least mine and other cryptozoologists, to believe that this creature wasn't what we now know as Sasquatch. The one big thing is that it was a very specialized eater. What we now think of Sasquatch is what we call a opportunistic omnivore. An opportunistic omnivore is very similar to like maybe bears or even humans. We can eat, of course, plants, meats, go foraging fairly well. You can even eat insects. With Giganto, its dentition is very important because, of course, with Gigantopithecus, the only stuff that's been discovered is its teeth and its jaws. But dentition, its teeth, are very important to show how this creature lived and how this creature survived. If we look at its molar teeth, they are very highly pronounced. Large molars, maybe even two or three times the size of arms. So this creature was crushing a lot, crushing hard foods. So possibly crushing like bamboo and plants like that, C3 plants. But recent discoveries have shown that Giganto also might have eaten maybe meats every so often, but it was most likely how modern day vegetarians eat meat. Like, there's been sightings of deer eating birds and cows eating squirrels, because every so often herbivores eat meat in order to supplement their diets. So with Giganto, it was most likely primarily a herbivore eating plants. And with what we now know as Sasquatch, that does not exactly custom made. It doesn't exactly correlate. Sasquatch is most likely more of a meat eater nowadays than a plant eater because it's an omnivore. And second of all, with the Giganto theory, its anatomy also does not exactly, in my mind, fit with what we now know as Sasquatch. Because DNA testing has shown that Giganto is most likely related to what we now know as the pongonoids or orangutans. So overall, this the cranial aspect of the Giganto is just primarily hypothesized. It's very closely hypothesized, but still we don't know what this looks like. So most likely it probably looked like a giant orangutan, very similar to. Have you ever seen the Jungle Book, the live action one?
Yeah, I have.
King Louis in that movie is actually a representative of Gigantopithecus. So most likely Giganto in real life looked like that, just giant orangutan, or even maybe a giant gorilla, but it would have been a quadruped. It would have been on all fours. And of course, the modern day Sasquatch is bipedal. And now, of course, some people would believe.
Could it like?
Yes.
Oh yeah. So I was about to say like, could it be like some kind of maybe adaptation thing that could have happened where it's on fours and then goes to two? Maybe that's why people think that, or what do you think?
That's actually one argument that a lot of people use. Like, well, if both this creature changed and then adapted to become bipedal. And with that, Gigantopithecus supposedly died out about maybe about 10 to 20,000 years ago. And with it, I don't believe there would be enough time for this creature to have adapted and become bipedal, especially very advanced bipedalism. Because if we look at the modern day Sasquatch with its foot structure and its leg structure, It's very derived by biped. And would this be more akin to a gorilla or an orangutan? That would have been a couple, probably maybe millions of years of evolution in order for it to really adapt into what we now know as Sasquatch. And
Mm.
one big thing that I talk about with Gigantopithecus is, well, let's look at its also dentition again. Like it's what we call a duophagus teeth. Duophagus means being able to crush very hard substances. Most people describe it with hyenas and Divolphaginae. These animals can crush bones. This creature was just crushing bamboo, but it's a possibility that it could have done bone crushing at some point, but we're not finding that in its behavior sense. But maybe if this was some type of derivative of Sasquatch, maybe it passed on that lineage today. Because we now know Sasquatch, there have been signs of them eating meat, so what if they could crack the bone and get to the bone marrow? But that's
Ooh.
only speculation.
Mm.
And one also thing that we talk about is, well, of course, Gigantopithecus was indigenous to China, indigenous to Asia. It wasn't indigenous to North America.
North
So
America, right?
so how would it have gotten over here? And we answer that with what we call Beringia. During the Pleistocene epoch, about 20, about 30 to 20,000 years ago, there was a land bridge between Russia and Alaska. This is called Beringia. And this is how humans got over here. This is how humans crossed over Beringia into North America. And other species like the short-faced bear, the lions, the smilodons, all these animals crossed over into North America. But if we look at Giganto, it would have crossed over Beringia as a quadruped most likely, not as a biped. And even once it got to Beringia, there was something called the Laurentide ice sheet. The Laurentide ice sheet covered pretty much all of Alaska, most of Alaska, and most of Canada. And for thousands of years, humans, once we got into Alaska, were stopped. We couldn't cross because of this giant ice sheet. The only reason we got in is we took boats around the coast. We had the ability for boats at that point.
Right, right.
But with Giganto, it wouldn't have had that ability. It would have been stuck and probably not evolved at all in Alaska. So most likely, at least for me, Gigantopithecus is not a good candidate for what we now have with Sasquatch.
So, well, hold on. So, what you're kind of saying is like you think Sasquatch was like native to the Americas?
Yes, I believe it's a, well, in a way, I believe it's a primate species that was non-indigenous, but then adapted for North America. And it's
Mm,
Florida,
okay.
because of course, not many people realize, but primates did also evolve here in North America. We had primates indigenous to here, but they died out, I believe, 10 million years ago. The last known primate to North America was Panamacetus, and that was down in Panama, and that's went extinct about 10 million years ago. But if we look at an even earlier time, I believe at least the Sasquatch lineage goes back to long before that. I believe it might go back to even what we call the Miocene. The Miocene was around 17 to 20 million years ago. And not people realize the Miocene Europe. It was very similar to what we now have as the Pacific Northwest. It was very much a temperate climate. It was very rainy. It was even swampy in most parts. And during this Miocene era in Europe, there was a plethora of ape species. You had Danubius, Kenopithecus, you had giant Epiphyseans. And I believe that these apes are what we now have as Sasquatch. And I believe they might have adapted and evolved over millions of years into what we now have as the modern day North American Sasquatch.
Oh. Do you think they learned from like watching humans and stuff, or like because they're obviously they're well hidden,
Yeah.
so
It,
could like they have possibly learned?
like behavior sets maybe from like like from humans and observing them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like kind of how like we watch birds and stuff like from far away. Could Sasquatch do the same thing and learn about our um what's the word? Like our advancements and stuff and like stay away from us?
Actually, I believe so. Uh, I believe a lot of Sasquatch adaptations are caused due to fear of predators and the natural world. And I believe once humans entered North America, Sasquatch was already here. And they saw nothing but a new predator once we entered. Because, of course, with the Pleistocene mass extinction, a lot of people bring up what we call the mass murder hypothesis, or well, we pretty much we mass hunted a lot of megafaunal species into extinction. And that's a possibility. What is mass hunting megafauna? Bison, the giant ground sloths, mammoths, mastodons, equids, camels, all these large species. It's a possibility that Sasquatch saw this and learned from the other species' mistakes and stayed away from humans. And they avoided humans. And that's maybe why, even into the modern day, Sasquatch are very elusive. They're not anywhere near really human centered areas. But at the same time, when we look at, let's say, the Native
Mm-hmm.
American stories, they talk about Sasquatch being a lot more almost friendly in a way, being closer to humans back then than what they are now. So, with it, we can kind of imagine that with Native Americans, they're very much in tune to the natural earth, very in tune to the environment. So, when once once cultures came in from outside, Anglo cultures and the colonists, and we destroyed forests, we burned down areas, we destroyed the natural world. Maybe this caused Sasquatch to be forced even further and further into the wilderness, areas that we maybe can't go build a highway into, or we can't cut down the forests. And that's what's caused maybe Sasquatch to be even more elusive now than they ever were before.
Hmm. Well, I like to think that that's possible. Like that's actually like what happened.
Yeah,
Like you know how like Native Americans like would have stories about them. Like what if the Sasquatch among themselves had stories about humans?
there's a possibility. Like that kind of brings up also the idea of culture with Sasquatch. Jane Goodall, when she first started doing research into chimpanzees, she said these creatures have a culture, and she was almost laughed out of academia because at that point you don't use human words for non-human species. Like you don't use culture for primates because that's a human only thing.
Mm-hmm.
But since non-human primates such as chimps and gorillas and even orangutans have shown to have a very loose culture or very proto culture, it's a possibility these Sasquatch also do as well. Maybe they have a possible language or ways to communicate. Because if we're bringing up the idea of language, there's something called the Sierra Sounds. In the 1970s, up in the Sierra Nevada, Ron Moorhead was able to collect several recordings of what we believe are Sasquatch. And it's very interesting because linguistics have shown that there is a pattern going on. There is a language behind these noises, and that there is most likely high cognition behind these communications. So I believe there are possibly stories of big Sasquatch maybe teaching their young to maybe avoid humans and avoid maybe lights at night and avoid natural human areas like highways and things like that. Because I believe it would be passed on from generation to generation. That's something we see in primates, known primates. Chimpanzees, they use very loose proto tools, and parents,
Yeah, I've seen that.
yeah, and parents teach their little ones how to do it. So why wouldn't Sasquatch teach their little ones maybe how to make tools or stay away from humans?
Yeah, because they seem more, uh, just because of how well they're hidden, it seems that they're more advanced than,
Yes,
say, like chimpanzees or something.
yes. And this does bring up the idea of like, is this a creature human or is it not human? Most of what I've really
Hmm.
been talking about recently is just the most likely to not human. But there are some arguments for it being human. For instance, the description of Sasquatch. If we look at the when they describe its face, they describe what we call a hooded nose, human nose. Chimps and gorillas, of course, have a flat nose. That's a characteristic of a human.
Hmm.
Their face, it's a very flat face. That's a human-like trait. We are not prognatic. A prognatic face is when, like a chip's face, protrudes outwards, almost not like a muzzle, but it just protrudes outwards, just for the larger jaw muscles. Humans don't need large jaw muscles because we don't chew that much. We don't chew hard food. But with Sasquatch, it's a possibility that they do, so they would need a little small prognathicism, but they still look very human-like. Their proportions are also fairly human-like. Of course, they have bipedalism, which is seen as a human trait, but there are some arguments
Hmm.
against it. My major argument I talk about with people that believe Sasquatch is a human is one thing: is that as long as we've looked at hominin evolution, there's always been tools. The oldest tools go back, the Odoan tools, over 3 million years old. And this was even before humans. This was with what we call the Australopithecines. They used these Odoan tools. Very simple, very simplistic rock tools that maybe used as hammers or as axes they kind of used back in the day to like cut things. But with the Sasquatch, we don't see really any tool use. Of course, we have stories of them throwing rocks and throwing sticks, but that's also something seen in primates, known primates. So, with a lack of tool use, it's most likely that these creatures are not human. Also, there's no stories of using fire or of maybe even of like, of course, tool use. There's no stories of them being more human-like. There's stories of them having language and things like that, but with my argument, I say, well, that's a possibility. What if these creatures are primates, not human primates, but have what we call convergently evolved alongside humans? Convergent evolution is when two unrelated species become adapted for the same environment. Think of dolphins and sharks. Totally unrelated, but they look very similar. Hyenas and canines. Totally unrelated
Hmm.
genera of mammals, but have become very similar. What if Sasquatch and humans have convergently evolved and become very similar to each other? And this
Do you
kind of
think like eventually they'll? Oh, sorry, I cut you off.
no, no, go ahead.
Do you think that maybe Sasquatches could evolve more, like saying like like a couple of thousand years, maybe we're still around. You think Sasquatches couldn't evolve to still be um these big creatures and then resemble like more like humans?
It's a possibility, but with that argument, it's a possibility, but with it, in evolution and ecology, you have something called niche differentiation. Animals and beings find what they fit.
Right.
It's like one thing I like to bring up is like when you go to high school and you walk into the cafeteria and you find your friends. Oh, that's where you fit. Or if you belong to a certain like subculture, if you're the jock or if you're the nerd, everyone has a little where they belong. Animals do the same thing. They go to a certain niche. And with Sasquatch, I believe they've already found a niche. Living in the wilderness, being very much like the kings of their environment. They would be the most intelligent animal out there. So I don't believe in evolution it would change their niche because if there's no need for change, animals don't really change. Like look at how many species have been around for millions of years. The horseshoe crab, for instance, the horseshoe crab has been around since before dinosaurs and really hasn't changed since then. So I believe
Right.
unless
Right.
an extinction event occurred in maybe human life and humans were to disappear, then maybe they would take our niche or something like that. But I don't believe if there's a large environmental change, I don't think they would. And also, real quick, I want to say hey to everyone that's live and in the chat. I am seeing a couple of my students. It's good to see you guys. It's good to have you guys here. But what are your thoughts on that, Adolf Jacoby?
Like about the whole could it be possible for like the whole niche thing?
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. They're not forced to evolve and adapt. So I guess yeah, they don't need to.
yeah. Of course, my dog's going off. Yeah,
And yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah, sorry about that, folks. You know how dogs are. They go off at the worst possible times. Oh God, no. But one big thing too but it's like prehistory of like Sasquatch. We have to look at the prehistoric species that are also living alongside it. They're also extant alongside the prehistoric Sasquatch. If we look at the Pliocene, we have large animals like the entelodonts and the Amphicyonidae. The entelodonts were also called the hell pigs. Imagine a wild boar the size of a hippo, but that would eat meat. Truly a monstrous creature. And then we had the Amphicyonidae. The Amphicyonidae are also known as the bear dogs. They had a mix of both canine and bear-like traits. And then even in the Pliocene, you had small saber-toothed cats like Homotherium and Smilodon gracilis. So I believe with these large predators living alongside Sasquatch, they would have to have grown larger to what we now see today. Because one thing that doesn't really fit with Sasquatch into like the environment is that if this is a creature that needs to hide, why is it so large? Why is it 7,
Right.
9 feet tall? And that's one thing that never really made sense to me unless you look at it from a prehistoric perspective. With me, I believe Sasquatch was built for the prehistoric times when megafauna were a common event. And in case anyone here that doesn't know what megafauna is any animal that's over 100, like 100 pounds. And back in the day, of course, we had giant ground sloths, we had mastodons, mammoths, we had horses that were almost 2 times the size of modern day horses, camels that were much larger than modern day camels. We had same with cats. We had the American lion that was like 2 times the size of the modern day lion. So, how does a species correlate to that? Like, uh, Kobe, have you ever seen like those paintings or pictures of like prehistoric times that you see like different species along in like a certain environment?
Could you repeat that? It kind of like bugged out for me a little bit.
Of course. Like, those like prehistory books, they see like a bunch of like animals on like a picture, and they have like maybe different names with different animals there. Have you ever seen something like that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know what you mean.
Well, I always saw those, especially as a kid. And I kind of one day I thought, well, heck, Sasquatch would, Sasquatch, Sasquatch would fit in right there perfectly. It's large. It's built to defy predators because it's so huge, and it would have fit in. The only thing is that it's a primate. Primates, of course, is not indigenous to North America, but we can find that out a little later on. So, if we look at like the predators, even alongside Sasquatch, it would make sense why it's so large because it had to fight off these giant predators.
Okay, I need to like hold on. So, what do you think? Why it hasn't gotten smaller?
Gotten
Because
smaller.
it's so big. It was made for the like prehistoric times, right? Or like it was like you know what I mean? It's for the
Yes.
prehistoric times. It's big. It wards off animals. It how come it hasn't gotten smaller?
Well, if we look at it, of course, we don't know what it looked like in prehistory. We we can only
Right.
speculate. So we don't know if it's gotten smaller. But also, from from Pleistocene until today, it's only about 10,000 years. 10,000 years. So it's very that's a short time for an animal to really change. Like not a lot of people realize. A lot of the modern day species, elephants, zebras, bison, black bears, grizzly bears, lived in prehistory in the Pleistocene. They haven't really changed much. So, like how we talked about with niches earlier, if an animal does not need to change, they usually don't. So I believe these uh, these Sasquatch haven't had enough time to really evolve and adapt to the modern day environment. This modern day environment is very similar to what we had back then. The only thing that's really changed is there's a large extinction event and there's not a lot of major predators, larger major predators or prey species. But I still think maybe they have changed to an extent. Like if you look at the Sasquatch here in the South, like the Falcon Monster and the Skunk Ape, they are very much smaller than the ones we have up in the Pacific Northwest. They are
Mm-hmm.
smaller, usually about described about 5 to maybe 7 feet tall. They usually don't exceed 9 feet tall. But that could be maybe an adaptation to have to the environment. Because of course the environment here is a lot more segmented than the ones up in the Pacific Northwest. And some people believe this might be due to the fact that these animals are a subspecies of Sasquatch. Me personally, I don't agree with that. I believe it's what we call
Oh.
an ecomorph. It's the same species, but just adapted for a different environment.
I had something going on in my head. I was thinking of a question to ask you, but I just forgot it.
They're good. Don't worry.
So okay, I remember. Okay, so you know how us as humans, we've kind of progressively gotten bigger
To an extent, yes.
over history. You think maybe just because Sasquatch is like, how you said that they don't have to change. Maybe they just stayed they're like they're the same what's the word? Like the same biology basically.
Yeah. So, like, humans got larger, so like with Sasquatch, they got larger almost.
No, what I'm saying is like because we've advanced and stuff, we've you know, as time has gone on, we've gotten bigger because we needed to change, but Sasquatches didn't have to, so they just stayed at their same,
Like,
like the
anatomy
same
for
since
the
before back, like back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does make sense because, of course, humans, we've changed a lot in our biology. We've gone from early Australopithecines that were about 3 to 4 feet tall, covered in hair, to what we now have modern day Homo sapiens. But would
Hmm.
also, if we look at the speculative evolution of Sasquatch, it has changed quite a bit to what I believe the origins of it was. Because when me, I believe it's a what we call a Dryopithecus. The Dryopithecini is a suborder of extinct primates. They lived in Miocene era about 17 million to about 2.6 million years. Well, 23 to 2.6 million years. So that's 17.7 million years for this animal to have existed, evolved, and changed to its environment. And of course, Dryopithecus actually means oak ape in Latin. In Latin, so this creature actually lived in oak forests and forests very similar to what we have now in modern day North America. So I believe this creature most likely could be kind of an anecdote to what we have in Sasquatch. And now, if we even look at the anatomy of Dryopithecus, it's very similar to what we can see in Sasquatch. Even though it was a quadruped, what we now know as Dryopithecus looks very similar to what we have as a chimpanzee. But there's a couple of things that kind of force us to believe what we have as Sasquatch. One thing is it's what we call primate measurements. Its arm to leg ratio. Its arm to leg ratio is 1 to 0.8, meaning its arms were just a little bit shorter than it, but a little bit shorter than its. Well, actually, its arms were a little bit longer than its legs. And of course, this is a significant to primates that are quadrupeds that walk on all fours. But of course, our arm to leg ratio is 1 to 1. Our arms are as long as our legs. This demonstrates bipedal stance. So, and our closest living primate are chimpanzees, and their arm to leg ratio is 1 to 0.4. Their arms are a lot longer than their legs, and Dryopithecus is right between 1 to 0.8. And this is an interesting fact not a lot of people realize. If we look at the Patty specimen, the Bigfoot that's seen in the Patterson Gimlet film, guess what her arm to leg ratio is?
I don't know. I really don't.
1 to 0.8. Exactly the arm ratio of a prehistoric species of primate called
Oh,
So it kind of makes us believe, okay, that's weird. That's a weird little correlation. But also the skull Dryopithecus. I wish I had one here to show kind of what it looks like. But what we call the anterior, what we call the foramen magnum. The foramen magnum, what we see here, is where the brainstem goes into the brain of the skull. An anteriorly based anterior magnum means it's placed further towards the skull, further towards the jawline. That's how humans are anterior magnum is. Anterior magnum demonstrates a. What's going on about Chad? Okay, not gonna worry about that. Demonstrates a bipedal stance, and we now know. Guys, can we get along in the chat? Come on, guys. Don't make me talk to you guys
I'm
next
gonna
week.
start asking you guys questions.
Yeah, well, I will. Make sure you guys are listening. And this anterior magnum demonstrates a bipedal stance. And why would this creature be bipedal? Unless we now know that a lot of early Miocene primates weren't fully bipedal, like walking like people, but they were kind of a cross blend of quadruped and biped. Very similar to what we now know as like gibbons. Gibbons walk on two legs, but very loosely and then get to the next tree. We now know creatures like the Nubius and Dryopithecus did the same thing. And the next step would be, what if trees were gone? Well, I think these creatures probably would become bipedal. And of course, if it became IPO, that's only the first step to becoming what we now know as Sasquatch. Then, if we look at them through a modern lens, if we look at them with prehistory, with the other megafaunal species around, I believe they would have gotten larger because the species around were just so much larger than them. So, with let's just say
Oh.
17.7 million years worth of evolution, I believe the Dryopithecus, which were very similar to chimpanzees, but with human-like traits, would become what we now know as Sasquatch. Even their faces, they had very short, flattened faces, very similar to what we now say Sasquatch. They had what we call a sagittal crest. Sagittal crest is a ridge of bone in the back of the skull of a primate. This sagittal crest is very representative of what we call the anterior muscles. These muscles are very important for chewing. So this creature had a pretty much a pointy head that a lot of people describe in modern day Sasquatch. It was almost bipedal. It had almost human-like limb measurements. The only thing is that it was indigenous to Miocene Europe. That's really the only issue. Unless we see how it could have evolved from Miocene Europe into Pliocene to North America, which would make sense.
Hmm. I had another thing on my. I had another question for you, but I completely forgot it.
Pretty good. I can give you a minute to see if you can bring that question back, because you know me, I love questions. Actually,
These are students in the chat.
yeah, I'm actually seeing one good point that one of my students, someone brought up. If Sasquatch were to be seen by people, it probably because if someone sees him, he'll become hunted down and be the last of the species. That's a very good point. With Sasquatch, of course, humans have always hunted down other human-like species, Neanderthals, Homo floresiensis. So if we saw Bigfoot, we probably would try to hunt it down. So, like, if Sasquatch was seen by people, they'll probably be killed off. That's probably why they're so elusive. They stay away from people because we truly are a dangerous species. We destroy the environment. We hunt things that we don't need to hunt. We cause mass extinctions. So no wonder Sasquatch would stay away from us. That's how they persisted for so long. Most likely. And what are you able to think of that
Maybe
question?
they were even there for some of the mass extinctions that have happened in the past.
Most likely. Like, probably they saw and did environmental change. Like, there's plenty of species we don't have around anymore. Like how a lot of people believe we hunted down the megafaunal species. Me personally, I don't agree with that completely. I believe the Pleistocene mass extinction most likely was also caused by environmental changes, most likely climate change. Because
Mm-hmm.
the argument for that is that there's only 15 kill sites in North America that we know of where humans have killed megafauna. And the only species that were represented were horse species, camels, mammoth, mastodon, and a giant beaver called Castorides. Only 5 species. But in total, there are 36 species that went extinct during the Pleistocene mass extinction. Everything from small birds to saber-toothed cats. All these species were extinct, but we don't see that within human kill sites. So I believe we could have maybe helped it along, but I don't think humans are the reason a lot of these creatures went extinct. Yes, that's a very good point. And let me see if I can show you on screen. That's a very
Oh, I
good
didn't know
point.
you could do that. That's so cool.
Yeah, like they would have seen animals hunted down by humans, and of course imagine like the trauma of like if you're a new species and you see a new predator come in because humans are we truly are predators in the natural environment and hunt down other species under that. Most likely, this would have caused Sasquatch to move away from other human species and into like what we now know as like the wilderness. And also, I'm seeing okay, like of course, yeah, the dodo bird. Dodo bird is of course very well known. Let me see if I can get you on screen a minute. The dodo bird is also very famous for becoming extinct thanks to humans, thanks to us. Because of course, people like to call it dodo bird because it's so dumb, it's so stupid. Literally, when we first went into Polynesia, we found the indigenous dodo bird. They didn't know we were predators. They always thought we was another species, and so we would literally be able to walk up behind them and club them on the head and kill them. So that's why we have like sayings like "go the way of the dodo." You become extinct. But it's not just uh, it's not just like prey items that we do that. It's also large major predators. Like I know for sure, Kobe, you would know about this animal, the thylacine, uh, the Tasmanian tiger.
Yup, yup.
Yeah, of course. Thylacine cynocephalus, the dog-headed pouchworm. This was a major predator in Tasmania and Australia, and this was closely related to what we now know as the Tasmanian devil. This thing would hunt down wallabies, small kangaroos, things like that. But once humans entered Tasmania, they started killing these creatures off simply because they thought they're killing off sheep. But recent discoveries have shown the Tasmanian tiger doesn't have enough bite strength to kill sheep. It wouldn't be able to. So they caused its mass extinction. They would put bounties on its head. I think it was like $1,000 for every Tasmanian tiger pelt you would turn in. So people would become rich off killing these creatures. So with that, we caused a really a beautiful species to become extinct, and it's kind of amazing how we have done that multiple times. But hopefully, with the Tasmanian tiger, with the skull I have right here, it might not be completely extinct. Some believe it might still persist in the areas of Australia and Tasmania because there are sightings of it still to the modern day, making it what we call a Lazarus taxon, species that was believed to be extinct, but it's actually not. It's like from the Bible, you have Lazarus, the man that rose from the dead. So the Lazarus taxon is like it's like they're rising from the dead, but of course they're not because they were never extinct in the first place. And I'm seeing a question here.
And I
Uh,
remember this because I did that research thing on it.
yeah, if only I had that skull back when we. I know you did a presentation on it. Unless you, if only I had that skull, you probably would have gotten 100 on that. Probably extra credit.
Right, exactly.
But better look at better look at the future than the past. Also, I'm seeing a question here. Why is it so
Yeah.
dumb? I know you're referencing the dodo bird. It's simply
Oh,
because,
the dodo.
yeah, I believe you're referencing the dodo bird, Adam. It's simply because they didn't need to be intelligent. A lot of prey species kind of just go to away, eat, sleep, and that's pretty much what they do. There's no need for them to be super intelligent. Because when you become more intelligent, you're using your brain more. When you're using your brain, you need more nutrients, you need more protein throughout the day. So actually being very smart is actually a very big lag on your body. And it doesn't really help out unless you have a good source of nutrition. Like humans, we use fire. And we're able to get more nutrients using fire while eating meat, so we have a larger brain. Other species don't have that ability, so they have a smaller brain just simply because it would use too much power. Yeah, it's kind of something they did not have
Basically.
yeah,
Basically.
have a good brain. They didn't need to be intelligent, so a lot of prey species aren't intelligent because they simply don't need to be. It's just as kind of as simple as that. But even if they were what we call bird brains, they weren't always so dumb. Like they were predatory birds in modern prehistory, and these predatory birds truly were probably terrifying to see. Like of course I know Kovu, you know there's one skull of a predatory bird probably right behind me somewhere behind me. Let's see if we can find out which
Wait, what
one.
was that? I kind of bugged out of it.
Sorry, like you might know there's a predatory bird skull right behind me. A prehistoric predatory bird skull.
Yeah.
Because right here, let's see if I can
It,
grab it.
it's to you, or yeah, it's to
Yeah,
your left.
yeah, it's the here we have Titanus wallery, the Polish rockets. These were a group of prehistoric birds that were living in South America. And these animals stood about 8 to 9 feet tall, so about as tall as a ceiling in a regular house. Well, imagine like a giant chicken, but with longer legs, a long neck. These animals would feed on small horses, and maybe even probably went extinct by the time humans came here. So we never had to see these things alive, but still a scary animal to imagine. Because during the Great American Biotic Interchange, when North America and South America came together, this species moved into North America. The only known forest rocket in North America is Titanus wallery. This species was actually found in Florida and Texas. So probably here in San Antonio, Texas, uh, 10 million years ago, this animal was walking around, killing small saber-tooths, killing what we call the Edwards wolf, and other major predators at that time. But soon enough, they were outcompeted into extinction because when animals compete with one another, one will it's either called niche differentiation, in which they find their own niche, or they become extinct, and that's happened plenty of times. Animals compete with one another until one goes extinct, and that's what happened with the forest rockets, the terror birds, we like to call them. They were outcompeted by by canines and felines, and maybe even Sasquatch. We never know. Maybe even if you were prehistoric Sasquatch, maybe you would have seen this creature running beside you, going out, trying to hunt you down. That would have been just scary enough to see. It's a giant 9 foot tall predatory bird with a beak the size of a human head. That would be pretty scary. Still with me, COVID?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it just keeps bugging a little bit right there. Like, give me a little gray circle.
Gotcha. That might be just internet connection or something like that. I know StreamYard's been kind of acting up recently.
Oh, okay.
I know. I think last time I did it, I know last Saturday I wasn't able to do a podcast, and I want to say sorry about that to everyone because I was on a nugget show last week with Grizzly Bigfoot, and I was doing an interview with him last Saturday, so I wasn't available for the podcast. I want to say sorry about that to everyone, but I will be trying to make sure these come out regularly from now on. Depending on scheduling and all that, I want to try to get people on, try to get people guests and all that. maybe next week we might have something a little bit special because I'm going out of town next week for a conference here in Texas, the Texas Bigfoot Research Conference. So I might be trying to get maybe some videos
Oh,
there and have them on the podcast. Yeah, because we
maybe you
have
could do like a short little vlog.
yeah. We'll try to do something like that because we have a couple of my fellow cryptozoologists going up there. Lyle Blackburn, Ken Gayhard. I know Josh Wolf Turner of the Paranormal Roundtable is going up there, and two big names in cryptozoology, Lauren Coleman and Lauren Coleman and Ken, Lauren Coleman and Adam Davies are going up there. Lauren Coleman's been in cryptozoology ever since the 1960s. He's been doing it for a long time, and Adam Davies has gone all around the world doing this. And I see a question, so you're not going to school. On the 14th, so I believe next Friday, I will not be there. Sorry, guys. I'm going out of town for this conference, but I'll be back the next week. And I know we don't have. I know Monday we don't have any school Monday because of Indigenous Peoples Day, so we don't celebrate for that. But also, well, since we're all on predators,
So you'll still see him at school.
yes, and
Don't you guys worry. Don't you guys worry.
yeah, and anyone else that's watching, yeah, I am a teacher outside of school outside of this, so it's kind of fun being a teacher and doing this at the same time. It's pretty fun, a little adventure. And since we are on prehistoric predators of North America that might have lived alongside Sasquatch, of course, the major one we have to bring up is my favorite, Smilodon fatalis, or saber-toothed cat. And if anyone's seen any type of documentary in prehistory or like Ice Age, they probably would have seen the saber-tooth, what we call a saber-toothed tiger. Even though that's so erroneous because
Pretty cool.
this animal is not related to tigers at all. It's called what we call a Mackay rodent cat. The Mackay rodents, or the saber-toothed cats, are believed to be totally extinct. This animal probably would have been living alongside prehistoric man and Sasquatch. But this creature, of course, if you look at it, you would think this would rip you apart and be such a terrible predator, but its bite was more of a surgical precision. These canines are actually very, very loose and very easy to break. So if they go left or right, they would break a canine. And of course, with a broken canine, an animal can't hunt. If an animal can't hunt, they're more likely to die. So it would have had more of a surgical precision. It would have gone for the jugular and bite onto an animal's, like a bison or horse's throat, and killed it like that, either from it bleeding out or just ripping out entirely. This was a super predator, but it was what we call super specialized. It became too specialized for its own good. It became extinct because it only fed on major megafauna, mammoths, horses, camels, bison, other things like that. Even Castorides, which was a giant beaver. Once these prey species went extinct, this animal itself also went extinct. So now we don't see any Smilodon anymore because its prey species went extinct. But in prehistory, this animal probably could have hunted down Sasquatch if they were around back then. Because, of course, all of this is what we call speculation. It's hypothesis. So cryptozoology, we look for unknown species, things not discovered by science yet. So we must hypothesize and speculate on them. Doesn't necessarily mean they are true, but it's something very similar to like a hypothesis in science. These are what these are. Well,
It's something that could like possibly be actually true, you know?
yes, just because I'm saying this doesn't necessarily mean it's necessarily true. It's what my research has come to conclude. conclude, but some people's conclusions might differ. There's some people that believe Sasquatch is an alien from outer space. Some people believe it's something that's non-physical and is like a ghost. Others believe it's a human species. Because we don't know experts in this field, we don't know who is right and who is wrong. And of course, Sasquatch is just only an aspect of it. We have other cryptids like Dogman and Goatman. You have the plethora of living dinosaurs in this field. And we can only speculate and theorize on what these animals are. And that's kind of what a cryptozoologist's job is to theorize, but an educated guess. We're not just guessing like, oh, it's a metaphysical being. No, that's not exactly an educated guess. We are using data and scientific proof to try to prove these animals are real, not just with what we call anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence is eyewitness accounts and things like that. That's a lot, of course, what we have, but we need to use also empirical evidence like DNA testing and data in order to find out what these animals are. So a lot of people like to call like Bigfoot and all that like monsters and this monster hunting, but it's truly not. This is a science. It's a science of animals truly might be monstrous and mysterious in origin, but these animals aren't monsters. They're just unknown species. Like when we would have if we had never seen terror birds in person, you probably would have called this a monster, but it's not. It's a natural species. Same thing with Sasquatch. A lot of people like to call it a monster. It's probably just another natural species, and one that's originated from prehistory. It's an animal not built for the modern day. It's what we call a evolutionary anachronism. Evolutionary anachronisms are animals or plants that were built for an era that's no longer around. I can give you a good example. Kovu, have you ever eaten an avocado, for instance?
Yes, and I don't really like them, but yes.
Same here. But have you ever wondered why their seeds are so large?
What was that?
Have you ever wondered why an avocado seed is so large?
Actually, now that you mention it, yeah.
That's because the avocado is a prehistoric plant. It was built to actually be eaten by what we call gonfodons, giant North American, South American elephants, like mammoths, Megatherium, which was a giant ground sloth, uh, mastodons. Because if we look at the seed of an avocado, it's like that size. Nothing living can eat that because animals eat seeds and then they're distributed through feces, through their pooping. That's what happens. With the avocado seed, nothing alive can eat that. It's just way too large. But prehistoric species, the prehistoric megafauna would eat avocados, then move throughout the environment and release their seeds as they pooped. So the avocado is what we call an evolutionary anachronism. It was built for prehistory. It was built for megafaunal species. The only reason the avocado is still around is because humans like to eat it. We spread its seeds because we planted them and made plantations for avocados. So that's like an evolutionary anachronism. It was built for age that's no longer around or species that are no longer around. And it's kind of a funny thing there because Bigfoot might be the same way. It was built for prehistory. It was built for the Pleistocene and Pliocene epoch, where there were things like this running around. There were giant prey atoms and giant predators hunting it. So, how does it live into the modern day? I think it's because of its intelligence. It's been able to evade human detection, evade predators, because it's such an intelligent species. Primates are highly intelligent. Like, bringing up one point with Sasquatch, we don't know how large its brain is because, of course, we don't have a body. But I've done some calculation on it, and I believe its brain size would be about what we call 10,000 cc, or or 1,000 cc. 1,000 cc is centimeters cubed, so like a cubic thing. And Neanderthals are about 1,500 cc, and ours are only about 1,300. So this creature would probably have a brain size the size of a human, or maybe even larger, maybe even 1,500 cc. This, of course, is speculation, but I believe these these animals would be very much on the intelligence level of a human. Maybe without our tools and our culture and our sciences, but it would be very similar to us in our intelligence. I just believe that their intelligence is in another area. We have culture, mathematics, religion, science. I believe these animals don't need that. They have areas of like knowing their environment, being able to evade predators. So they don't need to have culture and things like that. Like, heck, humans, we question our own existence. We wonder where we came from. I don't think this animal needs to do that. They don't need to question where did I come from or what is their religion. But they have that possibility, but they don't waste their brain power on that. So I believe it's just a very intelligent species, but it's intelligent in a different way. Do you have any points you want to bring up, COVID?
Yeah, so um, yeah, like humans have like a more overall as like a species, you have like a more rounded use of our brain. Like we have survival, but we also have like how you said like a more educated like with mathematics and like science. We've developed these things, and we're like more well rounded that way. Where Sasquatch is just more survival.
Yes, because it's like one thing I like to bring up is because of course you know me, I love history, and I like to bring this up. In the longest time in human history, we were surviving. We had to worry about where we're getting on our meals today, where we're getting water, where am I sleeping. So with that, if you're stuck in survival mode, you can't go beyond that. You can't. You don't have time for that. You don't have time to like stop and think, okay, why is this or how is this? You don't have that time. So I believe with Sasquatch, it's very much very similar. They're in survival mode out in the wild, so they don't have time to really stop and think, okay, why and how. If you look at our history, in American history, for the longest time we were in survival mode. We're like, okay, we need to fight off this threat, we need to fight this. It wasn't until what we call the Enlightenment era in the 1600s that we were able to stop and think, okay, why is this? How are we able to create art and religion and sciences? Look at European history. This is kind of off topic, but let's go there. We had the dark ages. For the longest time, people had to wonder, okay, where am I going to sleep tonight? Am I going to get food today? Am I going to starve? Until we got into the Renaissance. The Renaissance brought out new culture, new ideas of sciences. People like Da Vinci and Leonardo, and arts and sciences and all these great religious ideas. So we got from survival only into more creative thinking and enlightened thinking. And I believe with Sasquatch, they just don't have time to go beyond survival into enlightened thinking.
Also, with that is like the how we're also a threat to them, so they can't stop being in survival mode.
Yes. And that brings back like that question you had where a lot earlier, could they change like be what we have now as humans? Maybe if humans ever went extinct, maybe Sasquatch could stop and go from survival into enlightened thinking and go into like more humanistic ideas. And Yes, that's a very good point. So Sasquatch is only stuck in thinking, so he can't go into sub. He can't think beyond, so he's only in survival. Yes, but at one point, I do want to bring up as well. A lot of people, when bringing up Bigfoot and Sasquatch, they say, "Well, it's or he." That's not very really true. Sasquatch and Bigfoot isn't a he. It's a they or them, because there isn't just one Bigfoot out there. There's a population. So like when you say like, well,
Yep.
Bigfoot, like, is he out there? Or like I've gotten that question plenty of times. Like, is he out there? I'm like, well, Sasquatch isn't a he. It's a regular species that just exists out there in the world. And like when they talk about like Nessie or Yeti, like, oh, is Nessie okay? Like, is Nessie out there? I'm like, well, Nessie's a species. That's like saying, is bear okay? There's no such thing as a bear. There's multiple bears. But that's just
Yeah.
nomenclature and naming and all that with cryptozoology that I try to stay away from because that makes it more akin to like, oh, are we monster hunting or is this like not realistic? I want to try to keep it as scientifically minded as possible because I believe only via science can we discover these species and find out the truth of
Hmm.
cryptids and amazing animals around us.
I think how that like comes to be like the is he out there like for Bigfoot is because Bigfoot sounds masculine, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like that title, like, oh, it's a Bigfoot. You don't think like you think like male, you know?
yeah, and of
But
course,
yeah,
like
that doesn't it doesn't what was that?
I was like, yeah, like how like Sasquatch and Bigfoot can like be used differently. Like it's the same animal, uh, but it's the same type of
Just a
animal,
different
just
name.
two different names. Yeah, like nomenclature. Nomenclature is how we name animals. Uh, like how the American bear, black bear is Americanus, Ursus americanus. Ursus means bear, and Americanus means American bear. But that's something that's a whole different conversation we could go into right there. That's a whole almost like a whole lesson I can do. But yes, like if we go talking about Sasquatch, it's a population of them, most likely very small, maybe 4,000 at most. But maybe they were more persistent in prehistory because this is truly a prehistoric species. Because remember, animals just don't pop out of nowhere. This isn't magic. They have to evolve and adapt and change into what we now know as what we have as modern day animals. So with Sasquatch, I believe we know its evolutionary history, but that there's already pockets and things that we don't know for sure. Because even the most well-known primatologists will say we only know 10% of all primates that have lived out there in prehistory and modern age. So with that, probably there's Sasquatch things like that we don't know about because we just haven't found the bones and haven't found its evolutionary history yet. But that's something we can probably go into probably into a later date. Maybe how like why we don't have as much evidence for Sasquatch as we probably should. And I know I can see it is getting to about a little past an hour mark, and I think we have gotten into about talked about most points we've been wanting to bring up tonight. So we probably will be going out pretty soon. But before that, I do want to see if there's any like last words that you want to say, Kobu, any like final conclusions you want to talk about.
Any final conclusions? Does anybody have a question in the comments? Maybe we can bounce off of that.
Of course, like if you guys have any questions or things you want to bring up, let us know because I know there's a lot of we've brought up many points here. So if you guys have a question on a point, please bring it up. Let us know. Let's see if there's any questions that come through. Because if we're here, I can answer your questions if I'm here. And we can always answer questions. If you guys have any points you guys want to bring up, please let us know. Also, with it. Make sure you go support us. Like on this video, subscribe to my channel. If you want to share this out, of course you can share this
Share,
out.
share, share.
Yes, social medias, things like that. Share out the video. Let's see. Like the Yeti, we now know there is a population because they live in the cold, so probably in Antarctica, that's where they live because no one is there. Well,
Uh,
see,
we'll see. When you say that nobody is there, well, then how do they survive if nobody's there? You know what I mean?
yes. And
Well, what
also,
would they eat? Penguins? Unlike, I don't know.
yeah, and that's also one thing we have to bring up too. You think that in Antarctica because there's no one there, but how would something get to Antarctica? That's a very good idea and question, Adam. But it's like, how would a species get there? Because any species has its originations. Primates first evolved in actually uh, Asia and possibly Africa. So if they got to Antarctica, how would they get there? Have they swam? Would they cross land bridges? These are the questions we have to ask ourselves with species. Like, how did they get there? Like here in North America, we have what we call invasive species. In Florida, we have pythons and monkeys that aren't indigenous. Or indigenous means native. They're not. They're not from here. They were brought in from by humans. So if like Yeti or Sasquatch got to Antarctica, how would they have gotten there? With me personally, but I believe they wouldn't be there because there's no way for them to have gotten there. But it would make sense because it's cold. There's no population of humans, so it's a possibility. But we have to ask, how did they originate? And that's just the only issue with that search assertion. I meant to say that probably live in Arctic because there's no thing because it's cold and it's cold. Well, yes, they could live in the Arctic because, well, what we have is the Arctic and Antarctic. Antarctic is the southern continent, Antarctica, and that area. The Arctic is a northern hemisphere. That's the North Pole. And Russia and the Siberia, there's stories of what we call the Almasty, which is very similar to Bigfoot, but it has other differentiation. It's a little bit smaller, and it lives in the cold. So most likely these creatures could live up there. In the Arctic Circle of Alaska and Canada, there's sightings of Bigfoot up there. But what's weird is that these Bigfoot seem to be a lot larger. Uh, they're described to be maybe even 10 to 11 feet tall. And that's because of something called Bergman's Law. When there's colder environments, animals also get larger. Maybe for larger fat stores, to hold in warmth, or to hold in energy and power. So probably where there is cold, yes, it's a good correlation. Correlation means where two things connect. Of when Bigfoot, where it's cold, Bigfoot could also possibly survive. That's a very good point right there. Yes. Let's see if there's any more questions. Yes, Bigfoot and Sasquatch are the same. They're just different names for the same animal. Okay. Yeah, I think someone with Iceland and Greenland. Interesting little fact here. This is history. Iceland is actually very much green and very much like a good place to live, while Greenland's actually the opposite. Iceland's good, Greenland's bad because the Vikings actually named Iceland. What they wanted to do is they wanted to keep people away from Iceland, so they named it Iceland in order to make people think, okay, it's bad, it's cold, let's stay away from it. And then once they found Greenland, they named it Greenland in order to bring people in. They wanted people to live there and create crops and pay taxes things like that. So they named it Greenland, and it brought people in. Then they found out it was covered in snow and volcanoes, and people tried to leave, but not a lot of people left because we were just kind of stuck there because it gets frozen in most of the year. So that's kind of a little, yeah, catch 22. That's a very good point right there. Yes, it's they swap names. It's kind of funny how people do that. You see that a lot of time in naming conventions and naming how you name places. So let's see if there's any more questions. Yes, I'll be there for school
Like a
Tuesday.
catch 22. What does that mean?
Like catch 22, it's like when it's like two things are swapped, or when you're like caught doing something. It's like, oh, you how damn a good point with catch 22. Like if you're caught doing something like at school or something, and people say, "Oh, you're caught," be like, "Oh, I'm not," but it's like a catch 22. No matter what you do, you're always going to be wrong. That's like what a catch 22 is.
Oh,
So
don't leave,
in case
please.
you ever heard that point,
What?
thing. I'm seeing coming right now. Please don't leave. Sorry, guys. I know it's kind of. We try to keep this podcast about an hour. We've gone a little bit past that, but don't worry. We will be doing this every Tuesday night. So, of course, you guys will be Saturday night. What did I say Tuesday? I think it's Tuesday. Every Saturday night. So next Saturday,
Yeah,
it
you
will.
said Tuesday. I was gonna be like, wait a minute.
I'm thinking about maybe moving it to Tuesdays, honestly, but I am keeping it for Saturdays for now because it's just when I'm available. So, well, what we will be doing is every Saturday night we will be doing this podcast. If my co-host Kobu is available, I would love to have him on. And then,
I think I will be. I think I will be. Hopefully, my connection is better.
yes. I see some. Are you mad at us? Of course not, guys. Like I know it's good to have you guys here. It's awesome to have you guys here. Coming in the chat, interacting. Because when there's no people in chat, it gets boring. It's good to be having able to interact with, bring you guys up. So if you guys come in the chat, talk to us. I love having that. And when we have guests on, I know guests love having that as well. Because I would try to have authors on, cryptozoologists, people like that on this show, like you've seen in the past. I just recently, because of schedule constraints, it's hard to get people on because everyone's doing their own shows. It's hard for me to get people on because I'm busy, but it will. I'll have people on in the future.
How do we get in the podcast? You have to be 18 years or older.
Yes, that's one big thing. We want no, that's Adam. I know you are interested in this type of stuff, so you never know. Give it 10, 15 years. If you get yourself into cryptozoology yourself, I would love to have you on. I do see you looking at and reading cryptid books now in class, so that's awesome to see. So if you kind of kept the history in this study, it would be awesome to see like the next generation of cryptozoologists. Because I believe some people out there are. Like cryptozoology is a science, so if people want to get into it when they're older, that's awesome to see. Like I got into this study back when I was in elementary school, and I've been doing it ever since. So it's good to see like the next generation coming up.
And then who knows? Maybe you'll get a shout out when you start your own YouTube channel.
Yes. So like if you guys want to go into writing, things like that in the future, like I started writing my first book when I was in high school. I know you guys are in middle school right now, so if you guys want to go into that in the future, that'd be awesome to see. So you guys just keep going with it. You guys stay on for one more hour. Sorry, guys. I will be leaving heading off soon. It's good to see you guys having questions. But you guys are. I'd love to see you guys learning about this. If you guys are interested, please let us know. If there's any more comments you want to make before we head out, Kobu. And very not true.
Yes. Get the Ryan. I'm gonna put a plug. Get the Ryan Edwards book in the description right now. And that is
Yes.
it all.
Yes, and in the lower, if you look in the comment, if you look in the description, you have a link to my book and a link to my website. From there, you can go in and see if you can go get the book. You can go see where I have the podcast up. We will be doing more future episodes. You can see my social medias, things like that. So go like, share, and subscribe to this podcast, and we will be coming out with more content. And it's good to have you guys here. But of course, good night, everyone. It's been good having you guys on. So anyone that's live, thank you for showing up live. Anyone that's watching this at a later date, it's good having you guys. Thanks for the viewership. Thank you for subscribing and liking this video. And have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night. And note to that last question.
No, don't call me a leprechaun. I will cancel you guys. Thank you, guys.